It's an honor to be here with all of you today. And after Carolyn's presentation, I am breathing deeper right now, which is a good thing. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to shine a spotlight on the topic of ambivalence. And I'm going to suggest that topic of ambivalence is a very key concept in a guiding approach. And so I'd like to begin by starting with what I like to call the motivational puzzle, the motivational puzzle. And this is what the motivational puzzle is. So you would think that time spent in a dehumanizing, violent prison would motivate anyone not to reoffend. You would think that hangover, damaged relationships, an auto crash, and memory blackouts would be enough to convince a person to do something about their drinking. You would think that severe storms, rising sea levels, drought and fire, higher temperatures would be enough to convince and inspire someone to engage in activities that reduce one's impact on the climate. You would think. So here's the big question. You know, why don't people change? This is an incredibly humbling question. There's no easy answer. If there was an easy answer, we of course wouldn't be here together. There are many reasons, there are many factors on why people don't change. It is complicated. I'm going to suggest that one piece to the puzzle, one reason why people don't change is because of ambivalence. That uncomfortable place where we're in limbo, we're pulled in different directions, we're feeling stuck, the internal tug of war of having mixed feelings, conflicting feelings. I've got a cartoon to share with you. So this little person is standing on the cliff and says, I can't, I won't. And I'm going to have to increase this myself so I can actually read it. Hold on a second here. This is great. Okay, the person on the cliff says, I can't, I won't, I must, I'll die if I try, I'll die if I don't try, I will, I did, what have I done? And this is the human dilemma. This is the human predicament. And I'm going to suggest that that predicament is normal. And it's a defining state of human experience. It's a defining state of being a human being, of living in incredibly conflicting feelings. It's normal for people to say things like, I need to, but don't want to. I'd like to, but don't think I can. I will one day, but not today. I'm concerned about climate change, but I'm too busy to think about it. Riding my bike to work sounds like a good idea, but it's a hassle with bringing my clothes and showering. So this is normal. This is normal. And our dilemma is that we hate change and love it at the same time. What we really want is for things to remain the same, but get better. Isn't that true? This is kind of like what ambivalence looks like and what it may feel like inside. Internally, going in different directions. That internal tug of war. Now, I'm going to suggest that there's good news here. Good news. And the good news is that ambivalence is a normal step on the road to change. And we've learned that ambivalence usually precedes change. So there's hope here. And, and if ambivalence supports change, the big question is, oh, well, what is a helpful way of engaging and interacting with somebody who is really ambivalent about change? And let's first off start off with what's not helpful. What's not helpful in engaging with somebody who is ambivalent? So what's not helpful, and we all know this, what happens when we start confronting somebody who's ambivalent, or persuading, or coaxing, or pushing, or convincing, or telling, or selling? What happens when we say things like, you must, you should, you have to, you need to, with an ambivalent person? What happens when we take responsibility for change with an ambivalent person and say, this is a problem and it needs to change, and this is what you need to do? Now we've all been there, and we know what happens when somebody is telling us what to do. There's a predictable human response. When we end up eliciting from an ambivalent person something that is within them, and what's in them is the voice that says, well, it's not that bad, it's not going to happen, I'm not sure I need to do it. So when I'm the one making the arguments for change and telling somebody what they should do, I end up eliciting from the ambivalent person the arguments for no change. We end up eliciting from the other person the other side of their ambivalence, because they have both sides within them. So naturally, when somebody is pressured, the ambivalent person is more likely to say the things on the screen. And this is a big problem, because we've learned that what people say matters. People tend to become more committed to that which they give voice to. As I hear myself talk, I become more committed to what I hear myself saying. I learn what I believe as I hear myself speak. In other words, when we start pushing, promoting, and advocating for change, there's a paradoxical effect, which is predictable, of evoking resistance in the other person, which makes it less likely they're going to make change. Now, right at this moment, really important to emphasize that our desire to make change happen comes from the best of intentions. It comes from my heart. I want to make a difference. I want to support people. I want to do what I can to support the kind of changes that are needed to address the climate crisis. And here's the kicker: in working with somebody who's ambivalent, we have to start learning to do something which is really unnatural, really unnatural. We have to learn to actually suppress and manage and tame this reflex that wants to set things right, that wants to fix things, that wants to push, that wants to support big time change in somebody, this reflex that wants to make something happen.
Can you say that again, Steve?
Oh, I can say that again, Renee. So here's the kicker, is that in guiding and supporting change, we have to learn how to do something which is so unnatural. We have to learn how to tame a reflex of the heart. And it's a reflex that wants to make change happen, wants to get things moving, that wants to fix, that wants to promote, that wants to advocate, that wants to persuade and convince, and so forth. Because there's a paradoxical effect of when I start to do that, it tends to activate the other side of the ambivalence in the person, the voice of no change. So, circling back to the good news here, ambivalence is an opportunity for change. Ambivalence is a gateway for change. And we know, we've learned from the evidence and from our collective experience and wisdom, what is an especially helpful way of engaging and interacting with somebody who is ambivalent about making change. And here are some of those ingredients for supporting someone in resolving their ambivalence, in moving in the direction of change. So it requires us suppressing, managing, and taming that reflex to fix and to make something happen. And it requires a particular mindset that starts with me being calm and curious, incredibly curious. Oh, I want to understand things from your perspective. And it requires deep, active, empathic listening, because we know from the evidence people are more likely to make change in conversations. They're more likely to move in a new direction when people feel accurately understood. So empathic listening is one of those key ingredients. We operate in a way from a place of acceptance and non-judgment. We want to work in a way that supports and honors and acknowledges the other person's autonomy and self-determination and freedom to make their own decisions and choices. And here's a tricky one, a really tricky one. Detaching ourselves from outcome. And that doesn't mean I don't care. That doesn't mean I'm going to do my best. That doesn't mean that I am not going to guide conversations in the direction of change. What it means is that at the end of interactions and conversations, I more or less cannot be emotionally attached to this person doing one thing or another. I cannot be personally interested in this person making change. And there's a paradox here, because if I am emotionally invested and I cannot let go, then I immediately run the risk of manipulation and starting to do those things that don't work. The writing reflex. And then, in interactions with people, in conversations, what is so important is supporting people and beginning to explore and to talk about both sides of their ambivalence, both sides of their mixed feelings, guiding conversations in that direction, because we've learned that exploring ambivalence can stimulate and activate and increase motivation for change. The act of exploring ambivalence frees up energy and helps unscramble doubt and awaken action. So ambivalence, the exploration of it, key. And then last but not least, we've learned over the years that motivation is increased when the conversation is primarily focused on the reasons for change. So when you're interacting with somebody who's ambivalent or a group of people who are ambivalent, you are wanting to guide that conversation, navigate it in time, in the direction of the reasons for change, the arguments for change, because we know that when we do that, we're increasing the odds that change is actually going to happen. So here's the key ingredients: suppress the writing reflex, calm, curious, empathic listening, non-judgmental, supporting autonomy, detach from outcome, guiding the exploration of both sides of the ambivalence, and last but not least, focusing on and drawing out the good reasons for change in the other person. I want to hear and understand what they value, what's important for them, why they might want to do something. I want to step out of the role of being the one that is telling them what I'm guessing already is found within them. So here's the heart of a guiding approach. The heart of a guiding approach is drawing out the aspirations and the wisdom and the motivations and the hopes and dreams from the other person. So people are more likely to adopt change if they feel like they've authored the idea themselves. We want people to be heard, and we want to invite them to speak in certain ways. So in summary, ambivalence is an opportunity for change. Suppress the reflex to advocate and fix and convince and argue and push. Support an exploration of both sides of the ambivalence and guide the conversation primarily in the direction of the other person's own reasons and arguments for change. So I will take the spotlight off of ambivalence and turn it back to you, Renee.
Wow, Steve. I'll take a breath here. That was a lot. I have one question for you.
Mm-hmm.
One question. I mean, many questions, but one right now. What do you suggest we can do to suppress the writing reflex? And keeping in mind, I mean, here's the thing. I was just going to say, people working on climate change, environmental degradation, the stakes are very high. We are attached to the outcomes. And I noticed my saying that because I'm already suggesting as if we care more than someone who's working with someone on addiction or some life-threatening, there's that's part of the thing, is that there's such a profound sense of urgency,
Mm-hmm.
and so much is at stake, and we care and deeply and are in love with life, and we want to do the right thing. So how is there like one thing, or are there any specific things you can leave us with that we can work on to suppress our writing reflex?
Mm-hmm. So it takes practice. It's not easy. And I've learned over the years that what it really takes is transforming how I think about change and people and connections, so that when I'm primarily interested in drawing out the wisdom and the answers and the solutions and the motivation and change from people, rather than feeling like it's my job to make something happen. When I have that mind shift, that perspective shift, that is what supports me and whoever else in doing something that instinctively is quite different. And I always say it takes practice, and we can practice with our loved ones because we're oftentimes really good at pulling out the hammer and activating that writing reflex with those that we most care about. So I have my own metaphoric imagery on how to suppress it. And when I'm in situations, I'm oftentimes thinking about sitting on my hands
Mm-hmm.
or biting my tongue, or leaving the hammer on the upper shelf. So, for example, I'm gonna turn around here, and I actually have a hammer here. And when I'm teaching people motivational interviewing, when I'm guiding the learning of a guiding approach, I use the metaphor of the hammer quite a bit, because we're really good at hammering. And so I invite people to symbolically place their hammer on their upper shelf. And I'm actually going to do that for you all right now. I'm going to take my headphone off, I'm going to take my hammer, and I'm going to put it on my upper shelf. You'll see me do this. So I'm playing with you and having fun, and that's my final gift to you all, is to symbolically leave the hammer on the upper shelf.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's questions coming in around how do we do this and how do we apply this and how can I start doing this now? And, and we're all in that boat together. So I want to say, first off, you can go to the Project Inside Out Hub and sign up, and there'll be resources and some guidance for you. I would also recommend that people look into motivational interviewing training in your community, in your region, because there are trainers around the world, and it could be very interesting to engage in that work, as well as Steve, you lead trainings often. So I really encourage people to explore that, because it's a whole skill set, and it's a continual practice. But I know that it might evoke a lot in people to feel like, oh my gosh, I need to do this, and how do I do it now? And I think one of the things we can take away from your amazing and incredibly provocative and informative session, Steve, is to begin with noticing the attitudes that we have towards the people that we are wanting to be working with, and to just bring just awareness to what the attitudes are. Are we in that place of the writing and the hammer? And I think just that cultivating a witness is the really key first step, right? It's just like noticing, like, there it is, and maybe even imagining the hammer, is a really, really important first step.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having a chance to share with you all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And by the way, I placed in the chat a link to the motivational interviewing website,
Okay,
which
great.
is a wealth of information specific to what we call MI, in terms of training opportunities and the research and the evidence and resources.
Thank you. So a lot of what Project Inside Out is about is an experiment to see if we can translate some insights and practices from motivational interviewing, MI for short, as well as other modalities, as we've heard this morning, and Caroline and Leslie. There's a lot of modalities in psychology. There's no one kind of right answer. This is about an integrative approach. But the spirit of Project Inside Out, a lot of it is how to translate MI into approaches and skills specific for people working on climate change and the sustainability movement and sector. And that I see it as a process of innovating, of experimenting, of trying it out, which Steve, you and I have been doing in some of the workshops, where it's an evolving kind of translation from work that was developed in a very clinical context. How do we, take that into non-clinical context, and what can we bring the best out of it? So just to highlight that that's a really important underpinning of the work that we are now sharing out with you in the world. And the intention is to have continual trainings, opportunities for people to develop training and engage in workshops and tools and resources and all of that. That will be unfolding in time to come.